Hello and welcome to Greg and Steffen's Music Business Talks, where we pick a topic that's often an FAQ with our students at Pyramind. So we thought we'd take an opportunity to sit together here in our podcast studio at Pyramind and have a little chat about the things that seem to confuse people a lot, the things that people ask a lot of questions about, and hopefully we can help by giving a little bit of clarity around these topics that we'll be choosing from. So over here by my side, I've got Steffen Franz. Steffen is longtime friend, longtime associate, and longtime music business instructor at Pyramind. Yeah. You've been doing this for a little while with us now, haven't we, Steffen?
Yeah, I think we're 13, 14 years, Greg.
Wow.
It's a lot of students. I try in my head to count, every year. God, it feels like it's 1,000 students.
It's been a lot of students.
A lot of students.
We've been doing this for a good while, and so I think we have a good understanding of some of the stumbling points that come up for people here often. And I also want to say, obviously, you're not just an instructor, I don't even want to say just instructor. You're not only an instructor. You are also the president and founder of Independent Distribution Collective.
That is true.
And that goes back a handful of years now as well, huh?
Yeah, actually, I think IDC is celebrating its 16th, maybe even 17th, but I think 16th anniversary.
That's amazing.
And if you think back, it was born, some ideas that I ran by you many years ago. Mm-hmm. But also, Pyramind incubated our company.
That's right.
If you remember, our company was housed at an old address of Pyramind's back in the
not so old. I mean, we only moved out of there in 2019. We were there for 17 years.
17 years, yeah.
On Folsom Street here in San Francisco. Our 880 Folsom Street.
Love that location.
The Blue Room, as we affectionately called it.
It was great to be able to teach in one room and then go back to work and be in the same facility all the time. It was quite an amazing time in both of our careers and both of our arcs for our company.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, what is IDC? What do you do at IDC?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So IDC is basically a company that was born pretty much out of the need for independent artists to have the same type of footprint, firstly at retail. That was kind of how we started. We were a retail company that sold CDs and, later on vinyl, later on digital distribution. But really it was to kind of be able to help indie artists focus on being artists and letting the business side, kind of working together to create, at least at first, a distribution strategy. And then in the past, let's say 10 or 12 years, almost, 90% or most of our business is centered around marketing. Mm-hmm. So the company has, kind of, blossomed, for lack of a better term, from being kind of a channel, a distribution company that was indie artist friendly, to now really being like an all-encompassing distribution, marketing. We do virtual events, we do licensing, we do, pretty much anything an indie artist needs.
Yeah, in many ways, this is what a traditional label would have taken on, right? They would call these label services.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to put a name on it, it would be label services, and that's really exactly what we cater to, is an indie artist who understands, like, hey, I can't do all these jobs. I'm not a publicist. I'm not a radio promoter. I'm not a great graphic designer. I need a team of people. And IDC has really put together a pool of different types of people. So, for example, if you're doing a hip-hop release, I have a specific publicist that might cater to a more urban audience.
Sure.
If you're doing something that's, let's say, a rock or reggae, I have kind of some niche-type promotions that focus around those genres. And IDC has really become, in a lot of ways, a go-to for artists who they're great at making the music. They have the facility to do every aspect of production.
Content creation, as we like to refer to it, right?
And we really focus on delivery.
Yeah.
We focus on delivery, and we focus on not just delivery, because I think there's a lot of people out there that just deliver content to market.
Yeah.
Our main focus is properly marketed content delivered to all the services, to all the outlets in a, let's call it a syndicated effort.
Yeah. So let's talk about step number one today. Mm-hmm. Before you can start marketing your product and before you even want to get it out into the world, you've got to do something called copyright.
That's right.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about copyright, versus publishing, and some of the often misunderstood concepts when it comes to licensing. So start us off with copyright, Steffen. What's in a copyright?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. I think for any indie artist, just to go back a step to what Greg said, the storyline about that you can't do anything in the music industry without copyrights isn't really true. In fact, I would say a lot of people just do it, and they don't ever think about copyrighting their music. The law actually says that you don't really need to think about it, in the sense that a copyright is actually born when you compose a song. So that's kind of the first misconception. People mistake registering a copyright with the actual act of forming a copyright. So a copyright is formed when you hit stop on a DAW, when you are writing a lead sheet and you pick up the pen. The starting place is determined by what's called a fixed composition. That copyright exists whether you file a form to support that or not.
In Washington, D.C. with the Library of Congress.
With the Library of Congress. So firstly, to understand that a copyright is not made when you send your works to the Copyright Office. It is actually made upon the completion or fixing of the work.
All right. So if that's the case, why should I file a copyright with the Library of Congress?
Yeah, that's a great question, because really in this day and age, you can't seek remuneration on an infringement, meaning if somebody took your work and tried to monetize it, it would be very difficult for you to either A, stop that, or B, collect the royalties that you're due unless you've protected the work with a copyright, with registering a copyright. So let's talk a little bit about the rights associated, so we understand what we're talking about here. There are really like 5 basic rights associated, and this is true whether you are Mozart, or whether you are an up-and-coming bedroom producer, DJ who's making their first beat. It doesn't matter. Everyone gets the same slew of protections. And again, this conversation, copyrights, is really about protecting your work. Letting the world know, this is mine. I am going to properly exploit. You're going to hear us use this term in a good way, exploit our works.
Of course.
But also, again, to tell the world, hey, I'm being professional about my efforts. I'm not just throwing it up on a site like SoundCloud and, giving it to the world. No, I'm properly protecting so that I can eventually monetize the work.
Now, there's 2 kinds of copyrights out there. Is that right?
Yep.
There's a PA and there's an SR.
That's correct.
So shed a little light on the difference between these 2.
Okay, yeah. So a PA really applies to you as a writer, somebody who's creating the work by themselves, and it really speaks to the ownership interest. Like I would call the PA copyright kind of your, I don't know, your mortgage paperwork or your equity, right? The ownership.
It's the ownership in the song, but not the recording necessarily, right?
Right.
Because you could have lyrics, you could have a melody, and that's going to apply directly to the PA copyright.
That's right. Yeah. And again, we think about a PA, think about it like the title of a car. Right? It is the thing when you go to the DMV and you want to sell your car, you don't just take the keys and throw them to the person you're selling it to. In effect, you have to file some paperwork. And in our case, what we're talking about is transacting using the ownership, the PA copyrights, with other people. So the PA copyright really stays ideally with the writer, unless you sell the song, and
or the writers, right? Could be multiple writers, splitting the PA copyright.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then to your question about SR is the sound recording copyright. In effect, the album copyright.
Right, and it's important to note, since you called it out, sound recording, PA, performance art, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so again, the sound recording copyright is really, in most cases, the label saying, hey, we paid some money for you to create this work, and we want to share in an ownership interest. Because they can't share in the ownership interest of the songs under the PA, they need another tool. And so that's where the SR copyright was really developed, in the sense that you can't sign to a label, associate all these songs together, and then say, okay, thanks so much for the money and the support. I'm going to take this entire work and go somewhere else. The SR is what protects the label. Now, because we're talking to mostly indie artists out there, you're the label.
Right, so
you
they're
own the
self-publishing and they're
Yeah.
putting it out on their own label. Then you're going to own both, your PA and your SR.
That's right, and the Copyright Office actually is hip to that. So in reality, there is a form nowadays called APASR, which will let
There you go.
manage it. And again, I want you to visualize, for anybody who's kind of hearing this for the first time, all of your works fit in the PA. Meaning, as an individual, every time you create a song, there doesn't have to be an outcome. It doesn't have to go out on a label. It doesn't have to be released as a single for you to copyright it.
Matter of fact, with publishing companies, and they have songwriters that don't, they're producing demos with the intent of selling them to another artist. They're getting their PA copyright, and then they're selling that to another entity who's going to record and produce a new master out of it.
The reality is that copyrights is the thing that asserts ownership of your intellectual property. The rights associated with copyrights are very straightforward. The right to reproduce the work. That's an important right for you as an individual. The right to create derivatives, which again I think is very important nowadays. Remixes, underscores. Hey, I want to license this for something, but I want to take those vocals off. Derivatives of that original composition. Another copyright that is very important is the right to distribute copies to the public. So again, this is a right associated with the ownership interest in the songs. If somebody were to say, hey, I want to put out your music, the only person who can control that is the copyright owner. They are the ones that control the right to distribute copies to the public.
That's it. It's the right, the copyright,
That's
the right
right.
to copy that stuff and put it out there.
Copywriting is 100% protective. It's 100% protective. I like to call it kind of Law and Order, right? All of you have watched a Law and Order episode. It's really about no gray area, meaning I'm protecting this work. I created it. I deliver it to the Library of Congress. There's no break in the evidence trail, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
So now I've proved my ownership. That is the value of copyrights. Unless you're going to sell a fixed work, there is no real money associated with copywriting, right? In essence, if you own the work, like both Greg and I have lots of songs that we own. We own that work, and in reality, we control its destiny by using the copyright, by exploiting these rights we're talking about. Publishing is the exploitation of one right in particular, the right to perform your work publicly. And that's the next one I was going to get to on our list.
Well, what do you know?
The right to perform the work publicly is inherent to the owner of the copyright. Meaning, if you write a song, you are the authorized public performer of it. And for that public performance, you're given a royalty. This, my friends, is probably the lion's share of where the money is in the industry today. Whether that be you're licensing something for TV and film, somebody uses your music as a score or a bed for some game, even things like writing songs for other people, like you were talking about. That's the money is in the performance of that music. So what are we talking about when we're talking about public performance? We're talking about radio play. We're talking about, again, licensing for TV or film. Eventually, I think game scores, will have some sort of embedded...
Well, this is where it gets interesting because games have notoriously licensed pre-recorded tracks for a fixed amount and not paid a royalty on them because they're not considered public performances. Now that's changing as games become a streaming opportunity, live streaming from the cloud. Now we're going to see some definite shifts in how that's addressed in the gaming industry. That's a big rat's nest coming down the pipe here.
For sure. And again, I think it's very interesting to think about how each one of these things we're talking about individually may or may not affect you as a composer, but the big picture, all of these things make up, this term that we like to use, your revenue pie. As an individual artist today, where's your revenue going to come from? Those are questions you're going to have to ask yourself as a composer, as a producer. So one of those things that's very clear to us is the exploitation of our works publicly. Whether that be, again, from a TV show or a film, somebody licensing the work for a one-time use, somebody licensing the work for ongoing uses.
So who collects the money then for all these public performances?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, a lot of people misassociate these terms. There's two big kind of nonprofit entities that are in business to collect your performance royalties. That's ASCAP and BMI in the United States.
PROs, Performance Royalty Organizations.
That's right, PROs. And there are others. We could spend some time talking about CSAC. I don't want to go down that road. And then, of course, every other locale, I think 60 or 70 other countries in the world also offer PROs to their own citizens. So I think where the miscommunication or the misconnection comes with people is they think that ASCAP and BMI actually get you placements, and that's not their job.
No, not at all. They're there to collect on the public
100%.
performance. And before you can collect, you've got to register your works.
That's
and
right.
you have to choose one of these organizations.
Yes, these organizations have a very interesting system, meaning you're elected to membership. Like all music industry, it started out in a very kind of like gatekeeper world where people would have to choose for you to be accepted. Nowadays, I would say ASCAP and BMI have a very low bar. If you release something professionally, the likelihood is you could join a society like one of those.
Well, and that's very much paralleled the industry where now anybody can self-release, and the gatekeeping that once was there is gone. So you can self-release, self-promote, and register your works with one of the PROs, including CSAC, right?
Yep.
Because CSAC used to be very exclusive.
Yeah, CSAC is still a little bit hard. If you can't show a movie, you have to kind of show like a use that would allow you into CSAC. But ASCAP and BMI are pretty much like releasing is enough for them to kind of consider you for membership.
Right. And that means releasing on CD Baby or DistroKid or any one of the many platforms that allow you to get your music out on the streaming platforms.
Yes. In fact, I would say that any digital distribution, because there is a component now with streaming that does pay royalties to somebody's PA copyrights, in effect, the copyright owner. And we know that as another entity called Sound Exchange.
Sound Exchange.
So we have to
let's talk about that because it's a different kind of royalty that Sound Exchange collects versus the performance royalties that BMI or ASCAP collect.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. Sound Exchange came about when there was this kind of like gray area. Again, we're kind of going back to the idea that copyrights and publishing don't like gray. They like black and white. They want to understand ownership. They want to understand who are the rights holders. So when streaming, and more specifically streaming radio came out, there wasn't really a provision for somebody to collect royalties that were due for that public performance. So just like with ASCAP and BMI, they were created in effect so that an individual didn't have to go to all these other individuals and collect, but that they would use a system, and in the case of both ASCAP and BMI and now Sound Exchange, they use what's called a cue sheet, which in film or TV is really the thing that tells who was the use by. If that use is on something called non-terrestrial radio, digital streaming like Sirius XM satellite radio, that creates a different royalty. Because it's not considered to be a public performance the way a radio station would be. And
radio, but it is in a sense the way a radio station plays music because it's, well, I guess you're not choosing it, in other words,
That's
right? That's the key differentiator.
Exactly
here,
right. Yes, Greg, that is
really
exactly
important
right.
to differentiate.
Yes, because if you can choose it, it actually goes to your digital distribution like a stream would. But because you can't choose it, it plays like a royalty of a
like
radio.
Pandora was originally.
Exactly
Pandora now, of course, has gotten into the game of selective streaming.
Sure.
However, originally it was much like an algorithm-based radio station, right?
Pandora, Last FM. I mean, there were many examples of more radio-looking entities, and so they created Sound
streaming
Exchange
on the internet.
Exactly. So they created Sound Exchange, in fact, to say if you are the copyright owner or you own these tracks, that you're due a small royalty for those plays.
Right.
Again, we're not talking about millions of dollars. What we are talking about is figuring out for yourself these relationships so that when you get into the business of music as a full-time thing, these are the areas that will help you to make money, they'll help you to organize and protect your works. And in reality, we know sales, I'm not going to say sales are a thing of the past. I think that would be too broad of a generalization. Sales are much smaller pieces of your revenue pie. And so we must accept that, and we must say, well, where are there bigger pieces? Streaming is going to be a bigger piece. I didn't believe it when I first saw those royalty statements. My company represents hundreds, 800 odd labels. And I started to really knuckle down on like, where is this money coming from? And probably like now, even today, 30 to 40% of that money is YouTube and Spotify. And so in a company my size, if I'm seeing those numbers, clearly independent artists are seeing those same type of splits.
As are the bigger digital distributors, because they're the ones that are collecting on behalf of the artist for all of those streams and then paying out.
Correct.
They take a cut and then they pay you the lion's share, hopefully. At least, they're taking no more, hopefully, than 10 or 15%.
Sure,
right?
sure. And again, that's probably a conversation for another day.
Of course.
But what we can talk about today, and, we should wind it up a little bit, because I know we could talk forever.
We
Greg,
sure
you
could.
And I,
we sure could.
This will be great for all you people out there who are watching this, because me and my brother here, we are deeply knowledgeable about the industry, but we're also not afraid to kind of like talk about it. And we both come from an experience of kind of like, yeah, we're wizards and we're going to keep this to ourselves. And we're just not those kind of guys. Greg and I feel like disrupting the industry happens here. It happens by giving you the information that you need to be successful for yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the ethos behind Pyramind and why I created it to begin with.
And it's the ethos behind IDC, and it's why I created it to begin with.
And you've been championing independent artists from the get-go.
I have. And it's not for a lack of respect for what the major labels had done at the time. It was simply a lack of being able to excel in that system, given what I was trying to do. And, anybody who knows my history knows, I've been in reggae for a lot of years. I've been in hip hop for a lot of years. But most of my works are alt works. They're not pop works. They're niche. They're underground works. And so I think what Greg and I came to was like, there's a lot of underground people doing a lot of great stuff, and trying to give people an understanding of the industry coupled with a vehicle or vehicles to get to their goals. That's going to disrupt the industry more than anything else.
Yeah, and we have to remember, I mean, so much of this is very passion-driven. People make music because they love to make music. Yeah, we all want to get paid. We all want to make money, and so it's important to understand how the money's made. And I think today we hopefully gave you a great start at looking at copyright and publishing and the differences between them. If you like our video, we sure hope you'll give it a thumbs up, and certainly don't hesitate to subscribe to the Pyramind YouTube channel. We're excited to be doing more of these coming down the pipe. So stay tuned for more from Greg and Steffen's Music Business Talks. And thanks so much for joining us here today.
Are you looking for production guidance and direct feedback on your tracks? Do you want one-on-one help with a mix, music theory, production, or creative workflow? Then book a one-on-one mentorship session today with one of our knowledgeable industry professionals at Pyramind.com.